Hello, cloud community, and welcome to a very special educational segment we're doing with the Google Cloud team. My name is Savannah Peterson, joined by my fabulous cloud wingman, Rob Strechay.
Love being in the cloud, love being up there with you, flying high.
Likewise, Rob. We have quite a view here from the stratosphere in our world, and you know, sometimes getting the high level view and hanging out with all the thought leaders we do, we really need a conversation that grounds the technology and the hype and the movement that's going on right now, which is exactly why we have the two fabulous guests that we have with us. Bobby, who might as well be sitting here, he's on theCUBE so much these days, which I love. Welcome back, Bobby.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, and Brandon, new face, bright face, very delighted to have you here with us.
My first time, yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll try and make your first time as painless as possible, Brandon.
I'm very excited for it.
So, before we dive into some of the technical stuff, Bobby has hyped you up a lot.
Okay, all right.
In the best way. And I'd love for you to give the audience a little bit of your background. Because you're an OG here, you've got a wealth of technical knowledge.
Yeah, so I've been in the cloud native space for quite a while, almost 10 years. So I've been doing the sort of container thing, you know, since 2016, 2015. And sort of been following this sort of evolution of containers and Kubernetes and this intersection of machine learning and AI, which I don't know if you've heard is kind of a thing now. So it's quite exciting, yeah. So it's a fun time to be working on AI and cloud native technologies and Kubernetes and AI infrastructure. So that's really what I bring together, is really the sort of the combination of those things. And what I do at Google is I'm a product manager on the GKE team. So I primarily work with customers who are doing large-scale training, large-scale inference, you know, machine learning operations, all those things on top of Kubernetes and GKE. So it's a lot of fun. It's very exciting. Every day is new. Technology is moving incredibly fast, but it's yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And speaking of those acronyms you just talked about, Bobby, GKE and AI having a moment.
They are. We are.
Yeah.
We are, for sure.
Tell me what's going on. What are some of the trends you're seeing, the velocity you're seeing? Why is this conversation so important to have right now?
I think, well, obviously it's been kind of the year or the past 18 months of AI, like everybody talks about it. You can't go anywhere without someone sprinkling some AI on a little bit of everything, right? I think even grandmas and grandpas are messing with AI at this point, right? Like, you know, help me get on the Gemini thing or the ChatGPT thing or whatever. So like everyone's kind of seeing it now. It's bleeding into our personal lives, not just our corporate lives, and I think that's why it's kind of everywhere. But I think what we're also seeing is that it's becoming something that it's futuristic, but it's also like bleeding into everything, like kids to grandparents. Again, the range of people that want to play with this stuff, that want to touch it, that want to understand it, that want to get their mind wrapped around like, is this a next year thing? Is this a tomorrow thing? I think people can see the pace or feel the pace speeding up. Every day, every week, there's something else coming out, and they're kind of like, what's next that I might, you know, what's the new hotness that I need to make sure that I'm up on?
Yeah, exactly. What is the new hotness? And speaking of getting up to speed, training, you and I were talking about track and field last night.
Yeah.
Training can mean a lot of different things. Yeah. Everyone uses the term here, throws it around, but Brandon, what does it really mean to train a model?
To train a model, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, training models really all about taking some data. I mean, we're using a fundamental set of technologies that have actually been around for a while. You're using deep learning and neural networks, essentially under the covers, to make models that can do predictions. And now if you look at sort of AI as we define it today, sort of modern AI, we use things like large language models, or LLMs, and those are technologies that can be pre-trained with a whole bunch of data. Think of, you know, all of the knowledge of the internet and human civilization codified into a single model that can then be delivered to people, all open, you know, generally open source or available on the open internet. So, so it really varies quite a bit. It could be training a very small model with a very specific set of information, specific set of data that then has a prediction outcome, or it could be all the way up to very large language models that are doing incredible, you know, text encoding, text generation, or even, you know, image models. So it really varies a lot by use case, but training is really all about taking that data and making something valuable out of it.
So,
well, oh, go ahead, Rob.
So what do you see as the difference between what is inference and then what is fine tuning, and how do those play with training? Because I think a lot of people think, well, I train the model and I'm done. Or
now I'm going to achieve ROI.
Yes, or I'll be at ROI, which is even bigger question.
Yeah,
it's a really good question. So, you know, a model is really only valuable when it's in the hands of its users. It's just like software, right? We talk about how much time we spend building software in our development environments. It's really not until it's in the hands of a user that it delivers actual value. And the same thing is true with inference, right? A model is only valuable until we can put it behind an API and make it available to do something interesting. And so that's really what inference is all about. It's taking a model, whether it's a large language model or a diffusion model for images or a simple model, and providing an endpoint by which we can expose that to users. And that's really where the fun and interesting stuff happens, right? Inference used to be really just a part of the model lifecycle. So you train a model, you evaluate the model, you test the model, and then eventually you kind of you take all that work and then you put your model out there and you deliver it, which is the model that we've kind of been used to for the last several decades. But now with large language models, we can take off-the-shelf models and basically just start with inference, which is sort of a total paradigm shift. I can take a llama model as an example. I could take it off the shelf and I could do something really valuable with it. So inference is becoming more and more critical to businesses that are looking at deploying AI models in their platforms.
You just brought up a really important point, and I'm glad you said that. Taking things off the shelf. I think also when people think about starting their AI journey, which I know we talk a lot about on-ramps and how to get people on the right path, they think, oh my gosh, I've got to have all this compute, I've got to have all this data, it's got to be clean so that I can put it into this model to be able to do this, which is true if you're making your own model and you're doing your own AI. However, there are so many different off-the-shelf models that you can run to then flip the switch. How do you help people that you're working with navigate that solution? I imagine that's a conversation. You have to build it or they use what's already there, or maybe grab something and then add on top of that. What's that conversation like? Yeah,
it's a really good question. So it really comes down to evaluations. Like evaluations are now like a subdomain in and of itself. How do you evaluate the performance of a model? And it used to actually be pretty simple to evaluate performance. You give it the same sort of input and it gives you a similar kind of output, and you can validate, is that better or worse? But now that we're getting into large language models, doing that evaluation is quite human, it's quite subjective. And so over the last 12 to 18 months, this sort of evaluations as a subdomain has really continued to evolve. And there's some amazing frameworks, work that's happening in the open community, work that's happening with partners of ours like Hugging Face, where they're providing leaderboards and tools, so you can now actually see, how does my model perform against the common open benchmarks that are available? So now I can say, how does Gemini perform against this particular model? And then, of course, there's the use case specific stuff, right? That's the general purpose. Then there's also, okay, now I bring it into my organization, how does it perform for my domain specific tasks? So it is a complicated answer to a simple question, but I think it's evolved in a really meaningful way to make it more valuable.
I'd love to jump in and just to take a step back to kind of come get the people who may think we're going all the way kind of down the rabbit hole, as Brandon's given us some great information, but every AI conversation can go in so many different directions. And so when I talk to customers, I try to kind of categorize which type of AI conversation do we want to have. Are we talking about what you're building, how you're building, or how you're operating? And so Brandon's going down the path really of what we're building. Are we building models, training? Are we hooking models to applications, inference, where we're leveraging things off the shelf or tweaking those? There's how we're operating, where we might use AI to optimize our resources or security holes or things like that. And then there's how we build, where we're putting AI into our software development lifecycle process. So this is really about what we're building, not how we're building or how we're operating.
Staying there for a second, Bobby.
Okay.
Where are we with the state of AI? Everyone's obviously scrambling for it. I'm sure you're both talking about it all day long. I know you have a really good analogy for this.
So I have to go back to kind of the way that I think about this. And so my statement and then a metaphor. So the statement is AI's not the thing. AI's the thing that makes the thing better. So if we were talking about food, AI's not the dish, it's the sauce or the spice that makes the dish better. So back to what Brandon talked about with training and inference, if you're training, you're someone who's creating the sauce, if you will. But most of us are not going to be creating sauces, we're going to be using sauces, which is closer to inference, to inject that into some dishes that hopefully are going to taste good for the people eating at our dinner table.
So, yeah, staying with that analogy, and you can both play off of this, I think, is that there's a lot of sauces out there.
Yes.
And I think Kubernetes is having its moment, and GKE, and where you start to look at it, because there's so many tools that you can bring into a Kubernetes environment, but there's a lot of tools.
Yes.
And I think this goes back to which sauce do I pick, what menu who am I serving? Do I have a side of fries with that kind of thing? Help people break that down.
It's a good comment too. I think it comes down to like, what is the safe choice that you ultimately need to make? And I'm admittedly a little bit biased since I've been in the Kubernetes ecosystem for a while, but Kubernetes is the safest choice when we think about open frameworks for large language models or for AI models or for ML ops or really anything you're doing with AI, because you have so much choice and flexibility around the ecosystem. And so that's, I think, the exciting part. You're right, there are a lot of choices, and how we rationalize those choices sort of depends case by case, but we're starting to see some consolidation around common patterns and frameworks within the ecosystem, and it's something that we as Google have been working on quite a bit, helping not only on the Kubernetes ecosystem, but also contributing to open source frameworks that just make running these models, training the models, doing inference of the models better, more efficient on top of Kubernetes. And so, I know I didn't exactly answer your question, at least not using the food analogy. Yeah. Analogies are not my thing with food, but I'm a little hungry now.
Sorry about that.
Has that effect on
I know.
Yeah.
but you all can see why I'm so glad that Brandon and I get to work together, because then I can go ask smart people like him, help me unpack some of these terms.
Yeah, I want to hang out here for a second, because I think, and I say this with love to our entire industry, I think we've got a couple different communities at different levels of maturity in terms of both the adoption of Kubernetes and AI. I think AI actually very much accelerating the adoption of Kubernetes, but people still getting just started on their container at scale journey. And as they're thinking about AI at scale, it's particularly challenging. So what's your advice if I'm a strategist, maybe not as deep on the technical side, or someone in the C-suite even, evaluating what we're going to do in 2025, looking forward? What's your advice for getting started and not getting overwhelmed? Because there's a lot.
I think there's a lot of lessons we can actually learn from the non-AI workloads in Kubernetes over the last 7 years. We can really look at, maybe taking a quick step back. So if we think about what worked really well for Kubernetes, we started with this world where it was only stateless applications, and there was a very small subdomain of applications that we can run in Kubernetes. But things matured, and now we can run databases and all kinds of stateful kinds of applications. And so, I think about the same kind of patterns that we're starting to see now. Things that were really hard even 12 months ago in Kubernetes are becoming increasingly simpler and easier. So we're starting to sort of reduce the friction as a community, and as cloud providers, is what we do in GKE is really just helping customers to onboard faster, to reduce the operational friction, and really optimize for whatever level of scale you're at. If you're doing something really small, we can help you scale there, or if you're some of the largest customers in the world that are doing large-scale training and inference, we can help you there as well. But for a lot of customers, back to your question, where do you get started? I think you can use similar patterns there. Start with an API. There's APIs that are available and you can use them really quickly. Use an off-the-shelf Gemini model with an API, get started, iterate. But if you want portability and you want flexibility, that's where you can start to lean on that Kubernetes community.
I think that's a great point. Bobby, I see you over there.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in there. So there's so much that's happening right now, and I just want to say for the listening audience, I work at Google and I can't keep up with all this stuff. So if you're at home feeling like this is a lot, it is a lot, right? So it's not just you, I'm not gaslighting you, it is a lot. But I've got a mental framework that I want to share with the audience that's based around food, unfortunately. I do talk about stuff besides food, but this is kind of my mental framework to organize a lot of the technology that's coming at us. I call this farm to table. So the 4 buckets. There are 4 questions I think we need to ask ourselves in terms of whether this is something I need to dive into right now. There's what's in the ground growing, what's in the fridge resting, what's on the stove cooking, and what's on the table cooling. The things that are in the ground growing need resources, sunlight, water. It needs a lot of work. It's got potential, but it's not what it's going to be yet. Things in the refrigerator are ingredients, they're not recipes. They need assembly, they need instructions for how to put it together. Things on the stove are not ready. You can smell it, you can see what it's going to be, but it needs time and labor. And then the things that are on the table just need an appetite. They're ready to go now. So I put things into those buckets. And so you also have to think about your audience, right? Because you wouldn't give a potato to a toddler. Right. They want a tater tot, not a potato in the ground. So we've got to think about the maturity of the product or the feature and the audience to make sure we're right-sizing those.
that analogy, how long do you spend thinking about food analogies, or do they just come to you naturally?
Usually when I'm working out.
Yeah, I love that. When you're training, you're training the analogy part of your brain as well.
Yep. Natural intelligence.
Yes. I couldn't resist the opportunity there. All right, I got 2 more questions for you. When we're looking towards 2025, I mean, a lot has changed in the last year, the last 2 years in particular. We don't even need to recap it. We're living in a very wild time as technologists. What are some of the trends we're going to be seeing in 2025? You're right there on the precipice.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we're going to start to see a lot more is sort of distributed computing and the role of distributed computing for AI/ML. So distributed, taking a model and sort of distributing it across whether it be multiple nodes or multiple regions. We now have user base around the globe, so distributing models in a more sort of efficient way is going to become, I think, much more of a trend. It used to be something that, or really, up to this point, it's really the more advanced organizations that are doing that kind of work, but now as frameworks are starting to mature, it's easier and easier to do distributed training and distributed inference across Kubernetes clusters or nodes or whatever it happens to be.
So it's going to be easy and distributed.
Easy and distributed, yeah, and you can bring it to your users more easily, for sure.
I love that, Bobby.
I think there's going to be a level of maturity in enterprises about how they vet models versus how they roll them out. And so there's so many models or sauces on the shelf now that you're going to have, in my opinion, many sauces, few people, so kind of a tiger team evaluating what are the different things we want to have on the menu, right? So many models, few people, will roll out to fewer models, many people. Right, so how do we vet it, and then how do we roll it out and scale it out? And I think people are going to stop asking for sauces by brand name. They're going to say, I want a smoky sauce, or a sweet sauce, or this type of model, or that type of model, and so we'll be abstracted away somewhat by the model we're calling, and it'll be about the function it delivers to the end user.
And to build on that a little bit more, I think this pattern of model as a service, I think is going to become much more of a thing, especially within enterprise organizations. I think we've started to see this recognition that there's amazing frameworks and models out there that I can now start to consume. So as an enterprise, I now need to deliver that as a service to my business. And I need to think about what is the variety of model based on the tasks that I want to perform. But I also now need to think about, like, how do I iterate through those models? Do I have a new version? How do I get that out to my users as quickly as possible? And this is where, again, I come back to like the cloud native ecosystem. We've solved that problem pretty well, I think, for modern software. And I think we can bring a lot of those learnings back to AI/ML and deliver an amazing models as a service platform to our users.
I think that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, I'm going to ask one final question here for this segment. My whole thing at theCUBE is putting the human in tech, and we talk about a lot of really cool features and solutions and tools, but I'm going to ask you both, and I asked you a question about your family at the dinner table last time. This is a slightly different version of that, Bobby. Right. What do you hope, personally, could be for your family, for your life, for your hobbies, anything, what do both of you hope that our AI revolution that we're amidst solves or makes better for the world? Bobby, I'm going to you first. King of the analogies.
I want AI to feel like it's something we can all participate in, right? Maybe in different stages, right? So like, I'll give a non-food analogy for a second. All of us can't sing. Some of us are working a soundboard. Some of us are in the audience listening to people that can sing or buying the records of the people that can sing. Some of us are making microphones. We're all participating in that music supply chain though. And I want everyone to feel like I've got a role to play in this AI journey because this is going to be something that touches all of mankind. Let me just find my part and play that role. I'm not mad that I'm not on stage singing. I might be the band or the AV person, but I've got a role to play. I want everyone to feel like they can play a part.
You and I both care about inclusion. I know it's a passion, and everyone should be included.
Yes.
We talk about productivity as such like a mechanical thing, but I think about productivity as like such a human thing. Like, how do I remove toil in my life?
Yes.
And that is something like I really am incredibly optimistic about the power of AI, because like there's some things, let's just be honest, we just don't like doing. Who likes, and I struggle with this personally, like a blank sheet of paper, you're starting to write a paper, and you have, or an essay or email, and you have a completely blank sheet of paper. Yeah. Everyone knows how difficult that is. It's particularly difficult for me. But like, that's the kind of toil we can start to remove or reduce from our lives. So in that respect, like I love identifying the things that, if I could just make that a little bit easier, I could make these other qualities of what I bring to society that much stronger, that much easier. So I'm super optimistic about sort of leveling the playing field and helping to smooth out the toil and human lives.
I love that, smooth out the toil. That is great. As someone writing a book right now, the amount of times I sit there staring at the blank page and the cursor just blink, blink, blink when I start to read a chapter.
Exactly.
I feel that. And I think that now, as you said that, I'm thinking, oh, how can I use AI to get me growing a little bit to get out of that, kind of that first step's always the hardest, right, of any journey, as we all know. So, wow, this is so cool. I am so excited to continue this conversation in 2025.
Likewise.
And continue to build on the education. Bobby, thank you for bringing Brandon to us. This is outstanding. And Brandon, you really didn't disappoint. You lived up to the hype, man.
Thank you so much.
You're so good. We're going to have to keep doing it. Yes, it was. And Rob, thank you for hanging out.
I am glad to be here.
I know, we just get to sit and learn from the smartest people on earth.
I think this is going to be wonderful, and I guess we're going to be able to help a lot of people understand this stuff.
I think so, and we're all stronger together when we collaborate and teach and educate, and I hope that for all of you, wherever you might be watching, you feel comfortable reaching out to folks like Bobby and Brandon, or Rob and I, to ask your questions about AI, to talk about your Kubernetes journey, your container journey, wherever you might be. To Bobby's earlier point, we're not gaslighting. We really all are here to help. These guys in particular are super helpful. So there's no stupid questions, and no one has it all figured out yet, even the smartest people at the helm of this magical ship that we're all riding on. Thank you for tuning in to this fantastically special educational segment with Google. My name's Savannah Peterson. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.